So you like that video of me explaining how progestogenic 19-or testosterone derivatives thicken the skin, even at lower dosages, and now you want to know how to offset these negative effects and thin the skin instead. Well, it involves some nutritional changes, prolonged caloric restriction, and copious amounts of performance-enhancing drugs, because let's face it, let's be honest here, you're probably just too fat, like I am. Vigorous Steve here. Yeah, I said it. You're too fat. Deal with it. I'm too fat too, so don't feel too bad about it. And it's basically the entire gist of this video. Everybody is fat, and thinning the skin is merely an afterthought until you get yourself down to single-digit body fat levels, mid-single digits. And I'm not talking about 8 to 9% body fat. I'm talking about 4 to 5% body fat. That's the only time in your life where thinning the skin is actually going to make a difference cosmetically. So don't worry about thinning the skin too much, but that's not what you're here for. You already know how to instigate fat loss with pharmacology and how to spot reduce stubborn body fat areas because you've been subscribed to this YouTube channel for a while now and already watched that video. But I'll still link it at the end of this one just to make sure that you're in the loop. So I'm just going to assume that you know what you're doing and are currently trying to get lean into single-digit body fat levels. And you also already watched that video where I explain how nandrolone, trenbolone, and tresolone thicken the skin, also linked at the end of this one. As a quick reminder, these hormones contribute to the function of the various layers of the skin. For the epidermis and the papillary and reticular dermis, that's growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor, T3, estrogens, testosterone, progesterone, glucocorticoids, vitamin D3 and melanocyte-stimulating hormone, and unique to the papillary and reticular dermis, that's also dihydrotestosterone. And for the hypodermis, the subcutaneous layer and the adipose tissue, that's insulin, leptin, gastric inhibitory polypeptide, also known as glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. You can take those in exogenous sources as well, or at least agonists. Estrogens, testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, progesterone, glucocorticoids, growth hormone, insulin growth factor 1, T3, glucagon, noradrenaline, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of hormones and performance-enhancing drugs which act on the adipose tissue and help you get leaner. But those videos are already all over my YouTube channel. Once sufficiently lean, you can look at the methods to temporarily thin the skin for an enhanced cosmetic appearance. And again, these methods will also work at 8% body fat when you're lean uniformly, right? The thickness of your skin and the body fat distribution is pretty similar everywhere, all over your body. But the results might not be as dramatic as when it's done at 4 to 5% body fat instead. In order to get the skin as thin as possible, you need to limit collagen intake to particular types who contribute to skin formation and the structure of the skin, but not add thickness to the skin. There are 5 main kinds of collagen, some of which are available in supplemental form, but the large majority are going to come from dietary animal meat sources. Collagen type 1 is used in skin, tendons, vasculature, organs, and bones, and the dietary sources include beef steak, beef liver, chicken, pork tenderloin, elk, bison, salmon, whitefish, and shrimp. Collagen type 2 is predominantly found in cartilage and is a great dietary source. That's chicken cartilage or skin. Collagen type 3 is found in skin, connective tissue, the reticular fibers, and the extracellular matrix of internal organs. Dietary sources include beef steak, beef liver, chicken, pork tenderloin, elk, and bison. Collagen type 4 is found in the basement membrane of the skin, the respiratory tract, and the gastrointestinal tract. Dietary sources include egg yolk, membrane, and shell, not found in egg whites, as well as organ meats and bone broth. And it's the collagen type 3 and 4 that seems to contribute to skin thickness the most, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. And collagen type 5 is found on cell surfaces within hair as well as in the placenta, so you only have to think about that if you're a pregnant woman. And dietary sources include placental tissue, not something that's commonly consumed, the egg membrane, also not commonly consumed, and animal skin, maybe during the off-season when you're into chicken wings or chicken drumsticks. But during a contest prep, you're obviously going to have to forego those because chicken drumsticks and chicken wings, way too greasy. Obviously, you can synthesize all of these different collagen types from the amino acids found in animal meat sources and even plant-based protein sources. Excluding collagen type 3 and 4 does seem to work regarding the thinning of the skin over time when you combine that with caloric restriction during a prolonged dieting phase. And this basically means you'll eventually have to remove egg yolk, beef steak, beef liver, pork tenderloin, elk, and bison from your diet for these maximum skin thinning effects to take place while the diet continues. And there isn't really any scientific evidence to back this up, and it's probably because general population usually doesn't get into single-digit body fat levels, especially not 4 to 5%. And they certainly don't step onto a bodybuilding stage where these cosmetic changes really start to make a difference when the bright lights are turned on all the way to the max. And the tan is included, right? So general population probably would not even notice a difference from excluding particular collagen types from their diets. Anecdotally, amongst the bodybuilding community, limiting protein intake to elk, bison, chicken, salmon, whitefish, and egg whites for at least 6 to 8 weeks leading into the contest during a contest prep seems to offer the most desired results. But obviously, there's also a Trimbolone sandwich, a Mastrone, and Primobolan, and Winstrol, and whatever else in the picture that might also offer skin thinning effects. There might be a huge overlap here by limiting particular collagen types 3 and 4 and a particular anabolic androgenic steroid or other medications which are known to have skin thinning effects, but the desired results are usually accomplished within 6 to 8 weeks of various manipulations during a contest prep. The main reason why truly natural bodybuilders are completely diced to the socks with paper-thin skin at the end of their contest preps is because they're generally androgen and estrogen deficient by the time they step on stage. Dieting for truly natural bodybuilders are usually at 20 to 26 weeks. And by the end of it, serum testosterone, estrogen levels, dietary testosterone levels are usually bottomed out. And like I mentioned in the previous video discussing skin thickness, testosterone, dietary testosterone, estrogens, and obviously progesterone all contribute to the function and thickening of the skin through various different pathways. And most natural bodybuilders will still limit themselves to elk, bison, chicken, salmon, whitefish, and egg whites for the last couple of weeks of their contest prep to have a tighter control over their caloric intake, as these kinds of animal meat sources generally have lower fat content. And this minimal fat intake obviously speeds up the digestion of each meal consumed, meaning that in between meals, there's a longer period where the influx of calories is diminished. And this contributes to a favorable hormonal balance in which sustained lipolysis from adipose tissue occurs. So that means you basically have to go hungry for increased lipolysis, increased fat loss, especially at the later stages of contest prep. It's not unheard of for drug-free or enhanced bodybuilders to end up with a caloric intake around their basal metabolic rate towards the end of a contest prep, right? Sometimes that's required to get that paper-thin skin to win. So it might be white fish, chicken, egg whites, and vegetables only. Brutal, but that's what it takes even when you follow a kitchen sink approach. And there might even be some potential catabolism of collagen or reduction of overall protein content within the dermis and hypodermis layers of the skin when particular collagen types are removed from the diet and you're in a significant caloric restriction for longer periods of time. Again, no scientific evidence to back any of this up, but anecdotally within the bodybuilding community, these kinds of practices are known to work. And many a bodybuilder has won a bodybuilding show by limiting particular collagen types or particular animal meat sources. Dietary arachidonic acid also plays a role in skin thickness by increasing systemic inflammation within the body, and this causes the skin to hold a significant amount of water subcutaneously. So if you can limit dietary arachidonic acid for the last couple of weeks of a contest prep where skin thickness and thinness starts to matter, then you can reduce this systemic inflammation and subcutaneous water retention over time. Arachidonic acid is a type of omega-6 fatty acids and a building block for inflammatory prostaglandins. If you want to offset these negative effects of inflammatory prostaglandins from dietary arachidonic acid, then all you need to do is increase your dietary omega-3 intake, because dietary omega-3 and supplemental omega-3s have anti-inflammatory properties. So the best thing you can do during a contest prep in order to thin your skin is look into the ratio between arachidonic acid and omega-3s. As always, I already did all of the research for you. Here is a list of arachidonic acid and omega-3 content per 100 grams of all of the popular animal meat sources that we generally eat within the fitness community. Here you see that egg yolk, beef liver, pork tenderloin, and beef steak have generally high content of arachidonic acid, and shrimp, bison, elk, whitefish, salmon, and egg whites only have low to trace amounts of arachidonic acid, but whitefish, salmon, and shrimp particularly are pretty high in omega-3s. So if you want to limit arachidonic acid, I would stick to the food sources at the bottom of this list. And then if you want to increase omega-3 intake, then obviously whitefish, salmon, or shrimp. But you can also supplement with omega-3s from fish oil, obviously. Most competitors would remove the beefsteak or the beef liver around 10 to 12 weeks out from their competition, egg yolks at, let's say, 4 weeks out from the competition, and some prefer to keep the bison and elk in because they're reasonably lean protein sources, and remove the chicken or pork tenderloin instead because they have a relatively high arachidonic acid content and a reasonably poor omega-3 content. Now, during the course of a contest prep, white fish intake or salmon intake might be progressively more and more as particular animal meat sources come out of the diet. But again, you'll have to undergo some self-experimentation because not everybody responds the same way, and some guys can keep their beef steak in all the way to the end because, well, they megadose the performance-enhancing drugs, which seems to offset the skin-thickening effect of dietary sources. But if removing the beefsteak or the beef liver from your diet for, let's say, 10 to 12 weeks does contribute to a skin thinning effect, then obviously you also need to remove the gelatin supplements or the collagen type 1 and 3 supplements from your dietary intake because these are made from bovine hide. And it's the bovine hide that might contribute to skin thickness as well. So if you remove all of the beef products, including the whey protein or the cheese, which are also known to thicken the skin and give you terrible acne, depending on the whey formulation that you're using. If you remove all of the beef products, I don't think you have to worry about skin thickness on the day of the show at all. There are several medications which have skin thinning side effects, most of which we can apply topically. One of which is calcipotriene cream, which is used to treat psoriasis. It's a synthetic vitamin D3 derivative, and it works by slowing the excessive production of skin cells. But as a side effect, it might have skin thinning effects. There's glucocorticoid steroid creams, which I highlighted in the previous video regarding skin thickness, but they impair the skin integrity and are not sustainable for longer periods of time. You might be able to use these sparingly to spot reduce particular stubborn body fat areas, but you shouldn't use them all over your body because otherwise these glucocorticoid steroids will absorb transdermally and make you go significantly catabolic, and that's not what we're after here. There's phenylephrine creams, preparation H, ever so popular for the last couple of days leading into a bodybuilding contest to thin out the lower back and the glutes and the hamstring tie-in. And it's been used for decades now in the bodybuilding community. Sometimes preparation H makes you look a little bit weird when you apply the tan. So you have to use it sparingly, right, leading into the contest, because otherwise you can see these blotchy spots on the lower back and in the glutes. And that is a dead giveaway that preparation H was used as a vasoconstrictor in those particular areas. So it doesn't really thin the skin, but it reduces subcutaneous water, which has a skin thinning appearance for the last couple of days that you're going into a show, right? These practices are actually quite common for the guys that are not in shape, but when you're perfectly in shape, you obviously don't need to use preparation H because there's no subcutaneous water retention anywhere. And then there's retinoid creams, particularly tretinoin. When overused, this has a skin thinning effect by increasing the turnover of skin cells. Typically, retinoid creams are used as an acne or other skin disease medication, but again, if you apply it systemically for a couple days or maybe 2 weeks at maximum leading into a contest, you don't overdo it because again, the tan will not stick properly. The skin thinning effects are actually quite pronounced, but I would still favor isotretinoin Accutane over topical tretinoin cream because at 10 to 20 milligrams daily for 1 to 2 weeks leading into a contest, the skin gets very, very thin and the protein will adhere perfectly. I've applied this protocol, the Accutane protocol, to many of my competitive athletes, especially the drug-tested athletes, because Accutane is not included in the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list. But the skin thinning effects and the appearance that you get when you really apply the protein properly, very, very nice. I can absolutely swear by this. Again, you don't have to use Accutane for longer periods of time to thin your skin as the main effect that you're after. You would only use this if you suffer from severe acne that needs to be under controlled and managed. Right? A low dose of 10 to 20 milligrams per week even can keep all of the acne at bay that you might experience on cycle. But the skin thinning effects start to manifest at 10 to 20 milligrams daily. I would only limit that to 1 to 2 weeks leading into the show when you're already 4 to 5% body fat. Weirdly though, in the Roche medical insert for Accutane capsules, there's no specific mention of skin thinning effects which we do observe in real-world practical applications. However, they do mention a few adverse effects regarding the integrity of the skin, including dry skin, fragility of the skin, hyper or hypo, pigmentation. Personally, I always get whiter skin while running Accutane, but that's probably also because I run injectable glutathione in copious amounts, which is also known to whiten the skin. Accutane increases photosensitivity and has reduced wound healing. So the effects on the skin are well documented, but skin thinning effects are nowhere to be found, at least not in a medical insert. There are several performance-enhancing drugs which are known to have skin thinning effects. Most of these are anabolic androgenic steroids, which we would use in our arsenal during contest prep or cutting phases anyway, but there's two steroidal compounds which you can look into, but only under the guidance of a qualified and very knowledgeable bodybuilding coach, because these come with basically terrible side effects. So I would forego those and only use those if you're stepping on stage at the highest level. There's mastestrone and primobolan, which are known to have aromatase inhibiting effects, potentially reduce estradiol's binding potential for the estrogen receptors, and potentially inhibit estrogen-mediated gene transcription. Now, this scientific evidence is a little bit of a stretch. Again, mastestrone and primobolan has not been extensively investigated like testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, or nandrolone has been. I made two separate deep dives about mastestrone and primobolan already. You would be wise to watch those. There's no skin thinning effects in any of the clinical trials mentioned, but anecdotally amongst the bodybuilding community, they will tell you that particularly mastestrone has skin thinning effects when used at higher dosages over longer periods of time. That's why it's become ever so popular as of recent. There's boldenone and its metabolite dihydroboldenone. Both of these have metabolites that have aromatase inhibiting effects, similar to mastestrone and primobolan's metabolites. And boldenone specifically has mild progesterone receptor inhibiting effects as well. And maybe dihydroboldenone also inhibits the progesterone receptor to a certain extent, but I couldn't find any scientific evidence to support that. Anecdotally, dihydroboldenone seems to thin the skin more than the exact same dose of boldenone. That could be due to a difference in ester weight. You have boldenone andesonate, which contains less active pharmaceutical ingredients compared to dihydroboldenone cypionate. Now, with dihydroboldenone cypionate, less is more. And with boldenone andesonate, more is more. So it really depends on which compound you prefer and if you like to do research, because the scientific evidence regarding dihydroboldenone is severely lacking. And then there's proviron, which has aromatase inhibiting effects. It's mostly used to crush sex hormone-binding globulin levels and free up more testosterone. But when abused at the end of a contest prep, I'm talking about 100 milligrams to 300 milligrams daily for 2 to 4 weeks leading into a contest, it seems to thin the skin pretty well. There's the ever so popular injectable Winstrol, which gives you terrible post-injection pain, so you might have to dilute the injectable Winstrol to 25 milligrams per 1 milliliter and shoot that subcutaneously, but it has a much higher bioavailability and a much stronger effect compared to oral Winstrol, which seems to break down in the intestinal tract and within the liver, even though it's 17-alpha alkylated. So if you want to thin the skin and you want to use one compound, one anabolic androgenic steroid, injectable Winstrol is the way to go, because it's an angioedema medication and it has very strong progesterone receptor inhibiting effects. But we'll get into Winstrol a little bit more in depth later on in this video. And then there's mifepristone and danazol, which are both progesterone receptor antagonists. They inhibit the progesterone receptor from working entirely. These compounds are meant to be respected and not to be abused for longer periods of time because you get terrible side effects. Mifepristone is mostly used as an abortion medication, but it's also used in cases to treat Cushing syndrome. And danazol is primarily used in the treatment of endometriosis and fibrocystic breast disease because it has the ability to lower estradiol and progesterone levels and block these receptors. Again, these compounds are meant to be respected and not for the faint of heart, so I'm not going to give you exact dosing protocols. Discuss this with your bodybuilding coach and only if you're going to step on stage. So let's dive into stanozolol's progesterone receptor inhibiting effects with this study performed by Ellis et al. Published in March 1994, titled The Differential Effects of Stanozolol on Human Skin and Synovial Fibroblasts in Vitro. In this in vitro study, it shows that stanozolol blocks the progesterone receptors in skin and synovial cells in a dose-dependent fashion. And in the discussion, the researchers mentioned that stanozolol inhibits DNA synthesis in both of these cell types, which is mediated by inhibiting the progesterone receptors. And the second study I want to highlight is a little bit more recent, performed by Rarely et al., published on July 20th, 2023, titled The Action of Pharmacological and Synthetic Steroids on the Calcium Channel CoSPR in Human Sperm. In this study, they investigated the effects of various steroidal compounds on sperm function when compared to progesterone. Long story short, most of these steroids interfere with progesterone's ability to produce healthy semen and normal fertilization to occur. So when you scroll down to figure 5, you can clearly see that stanozolol inhibits the progesterone receptors at 10 micromole concentration. And this is further confirmed in the supplemental table, where stanozolol is basically at the top of the list of all the named steroidal compounds. If you need some incentive to come off cycle to get your wife pregnant and produce the most healthy, fertile semen known to man, this is the study to read, right? There's a lot of steroidal compounds which have been investigated. If they block the effects of progesterone on overall sperm function, this study was not available when I decided to come off cycle, but it does explain why my semen parameters improved so much over the year that I didn't use anabolic androgenic steroids. And here are the medical applications for stanozolol, both injectable and oral formulations. In the treatment of venous insufficiency, that's 50 milligrams injectable stanozolol intramuscularly every 2 weeks or 25 milligrams weekly. And in cases of hereditary angioedema, that's 6 milligrams oral stanozolol daily over 3 divided dosages. So that's 2 milligrams 3 times per day. So keep in mind that medical treatments use between 25 milligrams to 42 milligrams stanozolol per week. So that means you don't need much to get these beneficial effects, at least from a medical perspective. Now we'll save all of this for the stanozolol deep dive, which is coming up after I finish the nandrolone deep dive, because I do like my stanozolol, and I'm sure many of you guys are going to demand that stanozolol is next. So give me some time to finish the nandrolone deep dive, and then we'll get into stanozolol. But long story short, if you want to thin the skin with any anabolic androgenic steroids, injectable stanozolol is the way to go. Now, before you get too excited, there's always a caveat. Things start to get problematic when you start removing particular collagen types from your diet for longer periods of time and megadose stanozolol during that exact same time as well, and start to use megadosages of anabolic androgenic steroids, which have known aromatase inhibiting effects. So serum estradiol levels come down, you're blocking the progesterone receptors, and particular collagen types are not hitting your system for the structural integrity of your tendons, ligaments, and connective tissue to function properly. So basically, long story short, you're making yourself brittle in your skin thinning aspirations, and injuries might start to occur. Like Winstrol is known to alter the ratio between collagen types in the connective tissue and make them more brittle. So you really, I can't emphasize this enough, really have to be careful while using these practices discussed in this video, because you might tear yourself apart. And this is why it's so important to get yourself lean first for these cosmetic appearances to really take into effect. If you're 4 to 5% body fat, you already have a lot of experience in your bodybuilding journey. Do not train like a maniac when megadosing injectable Winstrol and limiting collagen types and, well, changing the ratio between DHT derivatives and testosterone over time, right? So if you go on the all-fish diet and you use these particular performance-enhancing drugs, do that at the later stages of contest prep when you already have a lot of experience. And again, there's something to win, because if you don't have the experience, you will get yourself injured and then you set yourself back maybe indefinitely, right? If you tear your pec or you tear your bicep or other body parts, it's not going to look so nice, and nobody is going to look at the thinness of your skin. They're going to look at your pec tear or your bicep tear or your hamstring tear instead. And with all those disclaimers and forewarnings aside, if you want to thin the skin to the maximum nth degree, you'll have to learn from the natty bodybuilders who have the thinnest skin, the best conditioning out of all the bodybuilding classes, enhanced bodybuilding included. Now, I'm sure Roman Fritz is definitely somebody you can learn from as an enhanced bodybuilder who also has the thinnest skin and the best conditioning that I saw on the Olympia stage last year. But obviously, we don't know his entire protocol, and that's his personal protocol, not for us to duplicate. And we have the Andreas Munzer protocol, but you probably end up with systemic organ failure. So let's not go into the Andreas Munzer protocol. When it comes to natural bodybuilding, again, like I mentioned before, they're basically androgen deficient, which you can simulate by slowly lowering your testosterone intake to basically zero by the end of a contest prep. It's not always required. There's many bodybuilding coaches out there who keep the testosterone in at, let's say, 1,500, 2,000, maybe even more milligrams per week. But what I've noticed for a lot of competitors, especially in their early days of doing bodybuilding competition, when you start to bring the testosterone down and increase the DHT derivatives, adding in the injectable Winstrol, serum testosterone comes down. Obviously, serum estradiol levels basically bottom out. The production of epidermal growth factor is significantly diminished. So the potential skin thickening effects through these pathways are completely minimized as well, because serum testosterone, serum estradiol, and serum epidermal growth factor are low throughout this process. And that might mean that you need to remove the exogenous testosterone out from your protocol for 2 weeks or 4 weeks leading into the contest. And there's two ways to go about it. You can slowly lower your exogenous testosterone intake while raising the DHT derivatives or the Trenbolone sandwich, even though that is known to thicken your skin, or just simply take the testosterone out for serum testosterone and serum estradiol levels to bottom out, and thus epidermal growth factor is almost non-existent by the end that you step on stage, right? There's so much manipulation you can put into place to thin your skin over time during a contest prep when it really matters, when you're 4 to 5% body fat. But otherwise, if you end up at 8, 9% body fat, don't even attempt to do these kinds of things, because the cosmetic changes and the risks of side effects is too severe. And then as a bonus for this video, there's several performance-enhancing drugs which are known to improve skin texture and appearance. Obviously, anabolic androgenic steroids, anything over 150 milligrams weekly, improves the appearance of your physique, including the skin, but you have to do daily subcutaneous or daily intramuscular microadministrations for the most stable serum levels so you don't get acne. And of course, 19-hours testosterone derivatives are known to thicken the skin, while most DHT derivatives are known to thin the skin. There's growth hormone over 2 IUs daily, but this also thickens the skin with subcutaneous water retention, but it gives you that nice skin glow. Clenbuterol, over 20 micrograms daily, helps with fat loss, but also seems to improve blood flow and overall quality of the skin. Same with tadalafil, improves blood flow to the skin over 5 milligrams daily. Telmisartan, over 20 milligrams daily, all improve blood flow to the skin and gives you a better appearance. Injectable glutathione, over 600 milligrams intramuscularly weekly, but 1800 milligrams intramuscularly or intravenous weekly seems to do the job a lot better. It helps with skin whitening, removes all of the blotches, has very potent antioxidant effects, probably the best injectable antioxidant that you can take, besides oral melatonin, but that's mostly is active in the brain. Injectable glutathione during the contest prep, magic for skin quality and overall health. Then Accutane, again, over 10 milligrams 2 times weekly. So if you don't want to do daily microadministrations and you get a little bit of acne, 10 milligrams 2 times weekly will keep that acne at bay and improves your skin texture overall. But if you want to thin your skin, you have to go with 10 milligrams to 20 milligrams daily. Then there's topical GHK copper or palmitate GHK. Palmitate GHK seems to permeate into the skin a little bit better than GHK copper does, but GHK copper is better for collagen synthesis and overall texture of the skin. But the problem is with injectable GHK copper, it's known to thicken the skin by increasing collagen synthesis, and also at the injection site causing some irritation because the post-injection pain of GHK copper, absolutely brutal. And then there's microneedling, laser therapy, red light therapy, etc., etc., etc. Things you can look into. Some of these, like microneedling, for example, also increases collagen synthesis and thus the thickness of your skin. But if you're after skin texture and not necessarily thinning of the skin, then these are the performance-enhancing drugs that you're looking for. All right, I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you find it informative. Don't go too extreme with the skin thinning medications or performance-enhancing drugs, because again, it's a temporary state to step on stage, not something you should be attempting year-round, because you're risking injury and you might compromise your health in the long term, because, well, injectable Winstrol is terrible for your lipids, and limiting particular food sources obviously might make you micronutrient deficient, and then your libido starts to tank, and that's not the best thing in the world. All right, You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A not so thin frontal bicep for you guys. I'm not at a point where I start to worry about skin thinning just quite yet because I need to get my body fat levels down. So what's the point, right? Why would I introduce injectable Winstrol or Accutane or any of these practices when I'm simply too fat? Take a page out of my book and get lean first. But when I get lean to 6% body fat, let's say 8%, I might start to incorporate some of the practices which I discussed in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.